Right, another driving stream. This time we're in New Zealand, Auckland, New Zealand, Central Business District. Driving to Tauranga in the Bay of Plenty. GPS says 2.5 hour drive. Get that thing out of the vision there. Any update on Tracy Twyman? No, I haven't heard anything further. I haven't had any time to do any investigation myself. One of the very interesting things that I did find out about Tracy was that she had written about QAnon and that she actually felt that some of the earlier posts of QAnon were referring to her work. So that's an interesting development. She also wrote about Disney and hidden hyperspace kingdoms. And it's an interesting conceptual area to explore. Just like to me, I find the flat earth ideas interesting to explore. I know that the earth curves because I've seen it with my own eyes from various aircraft. I've been on Concorde, which flew at 59,000 feet. And I've been in a Citation 10. It's basically the fastest private jet. Very, very nice plane at 46,000 feet. And in both of those aircraft, I could see the Earth curve. Also been night flights over Asia, over Singapore and Indonesia. You can see boats with lights on the water, and on a clear moonlit night, you could see that appears to curve as well. So is it just a flat Earth distortion effect that as you get to higher altitudes, the Earth appears curved when it's flat? I don't think so. But are we on this spinning ball, spinning at 24,000 miles an hour or whatever? I don't know. That's never really made a lot of sense to me. Although, if you lie on the grass on a clear day and just look up at the sky, and you have real clouds rather than chemtrail clouds, you do kind of get a sense that the thing is turning. But could it be a flat plane that has some sort of curve, or could it be like Nassim Haramein double torus, sort of electromagnetic type effect? I don't know. I haven't seen for myself, but I know that there's a lot of fake shit in space that NASA gets caught out all the time, faking astronaut stuff. The Outer Light Esoteric Ed just posted a video today. I didn't watch it yet, but I just came up in my feed that there's a Russian cosmonaut outside the space station, and there's a dude visible in his visor. So how does this dude get to be in space, which is supposedly a vacuum where you can't breathe without a spacesuit? Shit, looks like we're going to get a lot of traffic today. Damn it, rush hour. So the hidden hyperspace kingdoms kind of goes to this idea of the inner Earth, and you look into Admiral Byrd's expedition to Antarctica. There are reports of people flying over the poles, and instead of it being all cold and icy, they find this land with green grass and warm water and all kinds of stuff that is not supposed to be there. Now, Byrd may well have, when he went to Antarctica in 1947, he may have just run into an underground Nazi base there. It does seem like an ideal location to build secret underground bases. They can dig pretty deeply into the ice sheet and carve it all out and everything. But there's reports of UFOs, flying saucers. We know the Germans did have that technology. I mean, photos of them have come out now. So, that Bird's expedition to me is not proof of this inner Earth, Agartha, hidden kingdom story. But, when scientists, they say that the Earth has a core of iron that's molten or whatever, like, I don't even know what the latest theory is, but, I don't put a huge amount of weight into these scientists. Like, if they haven't seen it, the deepest that we've ever drilled into the Earth is like 12,000 meters. That's really not very deep. That's what, 12 kilometers, and what's the diameter of the Earth? I don't know, 10,000 kilometers or something. So, we really don't know what's inside this thing. Only the scientists have theories, and how can they prove their theories to be true if they can't actually get in it? So this is sort of what Tracy was writing about, and I guess she's speculating that that it may be possible to create some sort of hyperspace kingdom or alternate world that people could be transported to and live in, and maybe this is part of the breakaway civilization. What does it really look like in these underground bases? I mentioned the other day the US military training to fight in 10,000 or more massive underground cities and structures across all branches of the military. DARPA actually just put out a very unusual emergency short notice call for anyone with access to subterranean tunnels and caverns to help out DARPA, the project, by August 30th. So if you do have some sort of underground base or tunnel or cavern system that you're in charge of, I suggest you go to DARPA's Twitter feed and see if you can help out Homeland Security. What are they doing in there? What are they preparing for? I don't know. But supposedly there are a lot of tunnels in Iran. This is an ancient civilization in the mountains, and just like Afghanistan, it's been wars for a long time. No one's ever really been able to conquer Afghanistan, neither the Russian nor the US military. Iran will be many, many times worse. So, I don't think that war with Iran is actually a viable idea. From everything I've read about it militarily, it's a no-go for the winter. Our helicopters wouldn't be able to operate, and we would have an enormous disadvantage. So war with Iran will only take place in the summer, and what I've observed for, I don't know, certainly all this century, but I think going even back further than 20 years, is that around about April or May every year, as summer is starting to come looming up, some Israeli leader will, shake their fist at Iran, and we'll suddenly see on all the news, like, war with Iran, it's imminent, this is it now, we're finally going to have a war with Iran. And that runs through into after the 4th of July weekend, and it just seems to be a psyop designed to create maximum gas prices for the biggest driving weekend of the year, which is that 4th of July. And then after 4th of July, there's still a little bit of talk of it, but it seems to go away. So, hey, look, maybe I'm wrong. It's sort of like a market crash. It's inevitable that the stock market will crash. If you say, look, stock values are overvalued, they're inflated, and it can't go on forever, and there's a big bond market bubble, it's all going to collapse, and when the market collapses, there will be economic hardship. If you say that and that's a prediction, there's a very, very good chance, like 99% plus chance that your prediction will come true. It could be an amazing profit. The only problem is you don't know when that's going to happen, and is the market in fact going to continue to rise until that does happen? If you say, well, we're going to have war with Iran, and eventually they do, does that make you some kind of genius prophet? Whereas if I say it's all a load of bullshit to sell oil and get the price up and there won't be a war, and there's not a war, what does that make me? Well, I point it out every year on social media. I think people have short memories. But in these underground civilizations and cities, could these be these hidden hyperspace kingdoms that Tracy Twyman was talking about? She's got a video on it. There's a Tracy Twyman channel on YouTube. It's called Hidden Hyperspace Kingdoms. I watched the start of it, but I haven't been able to see all of it yet. But I read her article about it. And she's sort of got some out there shit, like she's saying that when you go on the Small World ride at Disney World, or Disneyland, whichever one it is, and you wear like a special bracelet or decoder ring or something, and then at a certain point of the ride, something happens, and you're able to like leave the ride and pass through this portal, and then you enter the hidden hyperspace kingdom. Now, if that was actually just an underground base, and there could be an entrance to the underground base on side one of these Disney rides, that's sort of not out of the question. And the revelation that the Disney Children's Cruise stops at Little St. James Island, Jeffrey Epstein's island, for snorkeling tours with the children, that's kind of concerning, Disneyland is absolutely full of tunnels and underground stuff. That's a known fact, and we also know that these tunnels are, much loved by the sex traffickers. So it doesn't mean that anyone that has a tunnel is involved in sex trafficking, but there's a lot of connections between Epstein and Disney. Two of Disney's chairmen were personal friends of Jeffrey Epstein. Some of their top execs as well. He's part of this thing, the Edge Group, which seems like a bunch of New World Order futurists. Recently, or yesterday, I read that there's now Me Too accusations against multiple Disney execs and beyond just Harvey Weinstein. So could there be some connection between Disneyland or Disney World and underground bases? I don't know. It's not beyond the realm of possibility to me. It's like with the flat Earth. Do we have a planar existence? Do we live on a plane? This is what the Romans believed in their mythology. And you look back 2,000 years ago, Scaligerian history is obviously a little bit under dispute, but taking the official timeline that we have is that the Roman Empire, was more than 2,000 years ago. Julius Caesar was about 50 BC. And even long before Julius Caesar, they had built their civilization. They had aqueducts, bringing water across vast distances across the continent. They had roads, they had bridges, they had arches, they had, Colosseum stadiums. They had hallucinogenic drugs like LSD, the ergot bread virus, and panem et circenses was the Latin word that means bread and circuses, and this is basically how would they control a mass population, particularly when the military was mostly offshore? How do they control the domestic population, or when the soldiers have returned from fighting? So they give them bread, which I think is probably this LSD-laced bread, and then they take them to this Colosseum for blood sports, and they watch gladiators fighting and people being murdered and torn apart by lions and stuff, and that I guess that relaxes the Roman people. But they had this sort of mass psyop technology for population control. These Romans knew quite a bit of stuff, and in their view of the world, the Earth was a single plane. You can think of it as the material plane, if you like, and then there was an underworld, Hades, which was the realm of the dead, and you crossed the river Styx. Charon was the boatman of the lower planes, and he would transfer you across the river Styx into Hades. You go past Cerberus, the three-headed dog, When I did Latin at high school, we had to translate Virgil's Aeneid, which is a classic work of literature. But these Romans, with all their knowledge of the world and stuff, believing that there's a flat earth and there's a realm of the dead, and that's under the earth, and then there's a realm of the sky where the gods are. And many other civilizations have had this belief as well. I don't know. I'm not ready to say the earth is flat, don't get me wrong about that. But I do have some issues with the spinning ball theory. I don't really have an issue with it being a globe. When you live in New Zealand and fly around the world, you get quite familiar with the map of the earth and what it's like in the air. And I have to say, some of the, I've flown many millions of miles in my life, but some of the flights I've taken just doesn't really make sense. The time that it took, or the route that it took, or whatever, it just, my actual experience of the map has been a little bit different from how the map looks. But, I don't rule anything out. So, underground cities connected to Disney World, Disneyland, quite possible. I don't rule that out. Hidden hyperspace kingdoms like the Inner Earth, Agatha, or like the Hall of the Mountain King, or, that type of thing. I don't know, mate. Maybe. Who knows what sort of things they're building with this breakaway civilization? Do they already have Elysium-style space stations where people are living like in that movie? Artificial environments in space. I mean, there's certainly a lot of information out there about what these things would look like, how they would be built, what is the science and technology behind them. In the late 70s, someone on my stream the other day mentioned Gerald O'Neill, who's a space futurist, a futurist about life in space. And they had, I can't remember the name of the group of all these people that got together, but it's quite an interesting bunch of cats. You got Timothy Leary with his thing called Smile, and there's something is squared. I think it's SMI squared LE. And I know the LE is life extension. I think the SM is space migration. And one of the I's is intelligence. I don't know what the other one is there. So this is Timothy Leary, the CIA guru, prophet of LSD, trying to bring about a pleasure-based society and follow in the footsteps of Aleister Crowley, being in the Navy, saying that the CIA is responsible for the entire counterculture. This guy, he was really into this space thing. In fact, before he got into cyberspace and virtual reality and promoting all that, he was promoting life in space. And somebody else who was extremely involved with this space society and the promotion of it is Michael Aquino. And that's something that doesn't really get talked about in relation to that guy very much, is all his space connections. But after the Presidio scandal, he was transferred. He stayed in the military. He was transferred to Colorado, and he joined the newly formed Space Intelligence. And there's another group that we don't really hear very much about, Space Intelligence. What are they up to? There's the NGA, the National Geospatial Agency, and the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office. They've got the satellite systems that are not just watching us optically with imagery, but synthetic aperture radar, where they can tell what type of cigarette somebody is smoking from the composition of the tobacco fibers inside the cigarette paper and how it had been rolled together. From space, they could tell that. And that technology is about 20 years old. They had that capability. I'm not saying how I know that, but I do know that to be true. And you also have a look at what they do on exploration of Mars, right? They put these orbiting satellites up with gamma ray spectroscopy, and they bombard the planet with gamma rays, and they're able to see underneath this planet's surface, what's the composition of minerals and things like that in the crust. So if they can do that to Mars and to the moons of Jupiter and shit like that, what would make us think that they couldn't do that to the Earth, right? It seems way easier to do it to the Earth than to Mars. But if they're able to scan this whole planet and penetrate beneath the surface multiple miles to see exactly what stuff is there, then what's all this oil and gas exploration shit, right? It's like, oh gee, let's go look in here, maybe we'll find some oil. No, they know where all that is. They know where the oil is, the gas, the gold, the diamonds. Are diamonds this incredibly rare thing, or is it just a natural process of the Earth that these things are being produced all the time? The same with oil. Is oil this scarce thing that, as Quinn and Jason tell us, as we extract this oil from the Earth, it's gone forever, and then the Earth gets lighter, and then the rotation speed of it gets affected? I don't believe that theory myself. I don't think there's a lot of scientific evidence for it either. But the concept of abiotic oil, that oil is just constantly being made all the time in the Earth from the processes of the pressures and stresses and tensions in the mantle interacting with the crust, and then being pushed up to the surface, that produces oil and possibly diamonds and possibly other minerals. I mean, I don't know. I find there's a lot of plausibility to that theory. And you look at scarcity theory of Thomas Malthus. He was being backed by the Paolo Sarpi group of Venetian intelligence. If you want to learn about the Venetians, Webster Tarpley has done incredible stuff. Watch Bertrand Russell, The Golem of Venice, is a fantastic one, because he's really tracing there how the concepts of scientific rationalism that were not only espoused in Bertrand Russell's writings and life work and philosophies, but also, flowed on to his friends such as Aldous Huxley, that these concepts actually were quite carefully engineered out of Venice, and they came up with this scarcity theory. Malthus was, I think, the 1700s, and he's like, look, the Earth is finite, therefore the resources of the Earth are finite, and the population of humans can keep growing, but it's not infinite, because there's a point where there's more humans than resources, and then that will control the population. And that sort of seems logical, right? But then the extension of it is, the population is going to grow too fast. We're going to run out of food. We're going to run out of resources. We won't be able to grow anymore. And since Malthus is predicting that, it's never ever happened. We keep finding more and more and more stuff. There was a huge thing back in the 90s. First of all, there was Y2K. Like, oh my God, Y2K is going to come. We're all going to die. And when I was talking about 5G the other day, I think somebody made a comment that it's sort of like Y2K. And I'm as afraid of 5G as I was of Y2K, which is really not at all. But as well as the Y2K scare of the 90s, there was another one called peak oil. And scientists, brilliant scientists with degrees in geology, who, you don't know anything about geology, Steve. You don't have a PhD in geology. You can't speak to this. Only a scientist can speak to it. Well, the scientists said that the Earth is going to reach peak oil in 2004. And that was the point where we had maximized our capacity to produce oil, and the cost of finding and extracting new oil would be vastly greater than the actual energy value of the oil itself, and so we wouldn't be able to explore or find any more oil, and then civilization would slowly collapse, as we would be not only unable to fuel all of our vehicles for transportation, but we would not be able to make plastics and all the other things in the world that the petrochemical industry relies on oil for. So, and there's a guy called Michael Ruppert, who's a whistleblower, kind of up there with Gary Webb with his Dark Alliance stuff. Ruppert was a former cop who was exposed to government involvement in drug dealing. He actually dated a chick who was CIA, who tried to get him involved in a massive cocaine deal in New Orleans. And he's like, this isn't right, and went and became a whistleblower. Got pursued. He got burgled in Oregon and had to basically leave the country, be on the run. I think he went up to Canada for a few years, and then he died in his 50s. I'm not too sure the circumstances of his death, but obviously any time a whistleblower dies, suddenly that's a little suspicious. But Ruppert was huge on this peak oil thing. Like, you read his book, Crossing the Rubicon, very, very good book actually, but it just turned out to be wrong. Now the United States is a net exporter of oil, and in fact the largest producer of oil in the world. And they've found through the technology of fracking, they've found oil reserves just in the mainland US much faster than what they know is in Saudi Arabia. So, boom, there goes that theory, peak oil. But people will still be saying that, scarcity theory, we're going to run out of stuff, we're doomed. It's just like, the millennial date of 2000, that was going to be when we all were going to die, and then that came and it was December 21st, 2012, and all these like CIA-linked shamans have predicted it, or whatever. It came to pass, and we're still here. And I don't even know what the latest one is. Probably an asteroid's going to come in 2033 or something. I don't know, but they keep coming up with these new doomsday, doom and gloom scenarios, and the world keeps going as it is. It's a fantastic book that has been very influential in my life and in my thinking. It's called Anti-Fragile by Nicholas Nassim Taleb, who also wrote The Black Swan. He's a fascinating guy, one of my favourite authors. It's such fun to read his books, but also to follow him on Twitter. He gets involved in a lot of social media feuds, but with intellectuals and academics. It's pretty funny to watch that. It's a contrast to the sort of low-life, unemployed, spurgy druggies that I seem to get drawn into Twitter feuds with somehow. But in Anti-Fragile, Taleb makes a point about, when a new innovation comes that has benefits superior to whatever the old standard was, the natural inclination of everyone is like, this is it. The old standard is dead, and it's only going to be the new thing from now on. But in fact, things in the world that have survived for a long time grow more likely to continue to survive for a long time. And so the example he gives is television. That when television came out, they said, oh, well, that's it. Radio's dead now. It's going to kill radio. And, hey, we still have radio, right? People still listen to radio. Television didn't kill it. When the internet came out, they're like, internet's going to kill television. I remember Bill Gates and this technology futurist called George Gilder. He had a book called Telecosm. And they were saying that in the future, bandwidth will be so cheap that it will basically be unlimited. And because it's unlimited, people will be able to watch, movies and TV and everything off the internet. They won't need them on separate platforms anymore. And at the time, this kind of sounded like crazy. Like, what? The internet would be unlimited? Well, how would the internet service providers make money? How would the telcos make money? How does the system even work if everyone has unlimited internet? But we just sort of take it for granted now that I'd say most people are probably are not sitting there thinking about what was their data consumption on their internet for the month. I don't know. Maybe on your cell phone you're tracking it. You have a plan where it's got some restrictions like on the minutes, but I don't know. My cell phones have unlimited plans. All my home and office internet is fiber, unlimited, 1 gig a second. High quality 4K streaming coming over this thing for free. Like, it's amazing world. I don't take it for granted. But that came about. But there's still a movie industry. You can still go to a movie theater and see a movie. You can still watch television if you choose. And although many people are increasingly choosing not to do that, these platforms still exist. So the theory of anti-fragile is that what's around for a long time will persist, and human civilization has been around for a long time. So, the likelihood of it persisting, I think, is very good. So I'm definitely an optimist. I'm a positive thinker, and I see not the glass is half empty or half full, but if there's like any drop of water in the glass at all, it's full in my book. And it just keeps getting better and better is my mantra. That's the way life goes. So now we've left Auckland. Well, I guess we're still technically in Auckland, but this is the south. We're heading into the Bombay Hills, and there's been quite a strong Indian community actually up in the Bombay Hills for a long time. So I don't know if that's why they called it Bombay, because the Indians lived there already, or if the Indians moved there because it was called Bombay. But Bombay used to be the biggest city in India. Now it's called Mumbai. And then this Bombay Hills is this is like the southern marker of Auckland. So once we get past this, we get into the countryside. I've got quite a bit of country driving to do today, so we'll see how long the stream lasts. It's more long straight roads than when I was driving into Northland. Very hilly and curvy roads, which are not great for cell service, but the long straight roads should be alright. That's one thing that Australia has definitely got sorted out, is along the major highways, even through the outback and everything, you've got great cell phone infrastructure. Driving past the tower right now. Doesn't look like there's any 5G stuff up on that. These cell phone towers can only have a certain number of connections at once. And that's part of the move to 5G, is being able to have more end devices on a single tower. If you go to a large concert where there's many people together, often it's hard to get for your cell phone to work, and it's just because the towers get overloaded. Burning Man, of course, well aware of this. They've been providing extra cell phone towers and communications infrastructure out there for many years. I haven't really followed it this year. I've been busy. It's bad timing for me how the timing of Burning Man's worked out this year. But they had a plane crash. They have all kinds. Burning Man has its own airport, and so there's all kinds of light aircraft going in and out there, even though it's on a very alkaline, dusty, dried up lake bed. You would never want to take your own plane there, in my opinion, and have all that stuff sucked into the engine. But they have their own airline now, a charter airline that flies back and forth, bringing passengers into Burning Man. But I don't think the plane that crashed was part of the official airline, but it did have 3 people in it that got injured. One of them serious. There was also a fatality, a car accident, RV, I think. A 61-year-old guy from Carson City dead. So every year, Burning Man seems to have at least one death, if not more, which is kind of sad, but whatever, the show must go on. I can't think of any other event that takes place on government land with so many deaths attached to it. That's supposedly in the name of entertainment, and it just happens to be, a giant sacrificial ritual around a Wicker Man effigy in a pentagram. That's just crazy conspiracy theory coincidence to think that if you do black magic rituals in a pentagram, all around the theme of destruction, that things will be destroyed, death will ensue. Correlation is not causation. So I saw a video this morning of Titus Frost doing his Rich Hawkins voice and talking about Abel Danger. Sounds like maybe Field McConnell attacked Titus, which is interesting because I'm pretty sure Titus has had Field on a show before. I used to like Field, and I actually have to confess that I took Abel Danger seriously at first when I first encountered them. And, now I obviously haven't looked a bit deeper into this Hawkins guy claiming to be a forensic economist, claiming to even invented the term forensic economist. It's just like constant lies out of that dude. And, their information about, there's this QRS-11 gyroscope or whatever, and this is used in all kinds of GPS and navigation devices, and by manipulating it, they could cause crashes. I mean, at first that kind of sounded a little bit plausible when you look into it, and there is such a device and there is such a patent. But there's actually no evidence of any of these claims they ever made. People have been wondering about the other Abel Danger channel that seems to be operated by Lestat and his crew now. That they basically took this over and started using it to attack their favourite enemy, Thomas Schoenberger, the mastermind of anything bad that ever happens in the world. All becomes of this guy Thomas because he doesn't like the Fango, so therefore he's determined on a path to destroy the lives of hundreds of people. And it's like the most ridiculous narrative I've ever heard. But not only do these unemployed kids and these millennials buy into it, but actually people that I thought were quite intelligent and reasonable, logical thinkers have totally bought into this thing that, Thomas is the most evil person, and anyone who refuses to disavow and denounce him is therefore working for him as an agent in this great plot. I mean, I heard Lestat's theory that I am hunting Jesse Spots. He said that if any YouTuber dies from now on, it will be my fault because of what I'm doing, and particularly Jesse Spots and my hunting of him. I mean, I don't know what the fuck he's on about with that. I like Jesse Spots. I watch his channel. I mean, I definitely don't agree with that guy a lot of the time. He's got quite interesting, unique beliefs about the world, but I've helped him out before. He was talking about this guy potentially being Bruce Lee, alive and assuming another identity, and he's like, if anyone in the audience has access to a subscription for that background check stuff, could you please run a report and see if what I'm talking about is true? And I do have subscriptions to these type of sites. I'm an independent researcher and have the means to fund things like New York Times subscription or Truth Finder subscription. So I ran a background check on this guy for Jesse, and I sent it to him. And interestingly, he sort of backed off the story, but he didn't really come out and say I was completely wrong. So it was sort of an indication to me about him as a truther. And then, he had Jan Irvin on his show, and there was a bit of a love fest going on for a while between Jesse Spots and Matthew North and Jan Irvin. And I couldn't believe that, because Jesse is against the Talmud. He's like, Talmud is the most evil book in the world, and anyone who criticizes me as a follower of the Talmud, I think he called me some kind of Talmudic inverter or something. I don't know, some bullshit. And so that was really strange that he was teaming up with Jan, because Jan is like doing multiple shows saying how the Talmud is a wonderful book, and anyone saying mean things about Jews as an anti-Semite, and don't you know that the Arabs are responsible for all the bad in the world? So yeah, that was some strange bedfellows there, and then obviously they woke up to Jan, and they all turned on Jan themselves. But I don't know, I've never had any beef with Jesse, so I'm trying to think what the fuck was that is even on about there. Maybe there's a show that I missed where Jesse Spots is coming after me or something like that. But I've certainly met, paranoid people before in my life, and in the rave scene and the nightclub world, there are people who they do too many drugs and they don't get enough sleep, and that's a bad combination. Particularly if they start smoking ice, they get on the meth, and they're up multiple days at a time without sleeping. It starts to drive people quite insane, paranoid hallucinations. And you take a look at the time of day these people are streaming in their time zone. People are doing streams at like 4 a.m. or responding to chat at 4 a.m. their local time, and you got to think, well, is this just like a healthy, sane person who happens to be unemployed and just, can't sleep? I don't know. Or is it someone that's like doing tons of drugs and getting paranoid and then, launching like a 5-hour live stream ranting about it all? I'm inclined to think the latter. But yeah, the takeover of this Able Danger channel, it seemed to happen in time for the amended complaint in Dave Acton's lawsuit, which is going out by September the 11th. And on his checkmatek2.net blog, he's been talking about Able Danger and the way that this brand seems to have been used for targeted disinformation campaigns. That's kind of the basis of the lawsuit. And as soon as I pointed that out, they changed the name of the channel. I think it's called Change Up now or something. But it's just these are disingenuous and deceptive people trying to mislead the public, and they're so happy now to have a larger channel that they can use to disseminate their disinformation. Jesse and Matthew backed away from Jan as soon as he was doing the pro-Jura stuff. Yeah. I was listening to InfoWars on the plane on the way home yesterday, and I heard Adam Green call in, which was awesome. He did it very, very well. He's very articulate and get to the point, to make his points politely and succinctly, forcefully, without saying or or anything like that. Like, he really sort of ran rings around AJ, and Alex is obviously a sore issue for him. I don't know. He's still pushing. Who is the enemy that we should be concerned about? It's a good case to be made that China is not a friendly nation to the interests of the United States, and will act against the best interests of the United States any opportunity they get. But in the history of that nation over many thousands of years, they haven't really been a conquering imperial nation. Although you can argue whether Genghis Khan counts as being Chinese, or was he a Tartarian or Khazarian or whatever. Mongol is Mongol Chinese. Alright, looks like we're back. Long, straight section of road. So strange that I lost you there. Could possibly have been the topic of conversation. But anyway, this caller to Nathan's show saying it wasn't enough to give equal rights to LGBT, that now what they're pushing for is that you're forced to legitimise them. So if you're a straight man and you don't want to date another man, that's hate speech. You must want to be gay because that's part of their acceptance. And if you're a man and you don't want to date a transsexual chick with a dick, then that's hate speech as well. And you're not allowed to have that preference. So it's they go from we're a marginalised member of society, we want equal rights, do they get it to right now we have to marginalise everybody else because that's the only fair thing to do. And that's cultural Marxism. It's the ultimate divide and conquer. You break everyone into these fragmented groups, and then you tell each group that they are legitimate and that they are persecuted and that they have to fight for their rights. And the way to do that is to delegitimise all the other groups against them. So it's a strategy for the destruction of society. There's nothing good that I can see coming out of cultural Marxism. And even Marxism, right, I sort of get the idea that some people are poor, some people are lazy. How can those people survive? Just let the state run their lives for them and give them like a house and free food and everything, and so they don't have to have jobs. Or if they do have jobs, who's to say that a CEO is better than a toilet cleaner? The CEO probably thinks he's big because he's got a nice office and he gets paid a lot of money, but a toilet cleaner's a human and a CEO's a human, therefore they're the same. So a CEO should get paid the same as a toilet cleaner and get treated the same as a toilet cleaner. That's to me the essential ideas of Marxism. And communism, I'm sure the Marxists would state it in a different way, but there's sort of some merit in some of those ideas. New Zealand's a socialist country. We have socialised medicine, free healthcare, free education, pretty much. It's not my own philosophy, but see there's some merit. But with the cultural Marxism, what's the fucking merit? How does anybody benefit from this? The only people who benefit are the ones wishing to see the destruction of civilization. And another caller was saying that Mike Adams, the health ranger, is convinced that aliens are terraforming the Earth right now. And I don't know, he might have a point, dude. He might have a point. What's up with these chemtrails? What's up with all these fires, Is it really all just accident, these fires? I don't know. It seems strange that Brazil gets an anti-globalist president, and then almost immediately he's got a crisis on his hands of the Amazon burning down and, all the world's attention turning to the horrors of Brazil, etc. But massive amounts of habitat destruction, always a bad thing. But there's actually been some pretty good efforts to reforest and replant a lot of the cleared land around the Amazon. So I don't know, it would be great if we could get accurate information about the state of the world's environment, but we can't. It's so highly politically charged. So pretty nice countryside out here, farmland, cows, sheep. New Zealand did have the most sheep per capita out of any country in the world. I'm not sure if that's still the case. I think our proportional sheep population has decreased, while Australia's has increased. But that's the big industries down here are agriculture and tourism. And then we have a tech sector that's definitely punching above its weight and trying to get better. Last night I went to the Ice Angel Awards, which is a venture capital group. It's the 9th year of awards. They had about 1,000 people there. The Spark Arena in Auckland. A couple of interesting ideas, some that I didn't think were that great, but I've been to many different kinds of angel investor meetings in California, and it wasn't like that. You know, that you stand up in front of 1,000 people, pitch your idea, and get your funding. I don't know how many countries in the world actually have a thing like that, but it's probably something to be said for access to those kind of numbers, although the companies that are there presenting have sort of been pre-selected. Some interesting innovations in material science, like nanotechnology coatings for stuff to prevent wear and tear. These guys had basically a 3D printer for metal die casting that can produce 50 metal parts in any shape in a day, and supposedly for the people that need prototyping, at the moment it takes weeks for them to get that out of the lab. So I thought that was interesting. Company called Rocos. Okay, looks like we're back again. So yeah, last night I was talking to the guys behind Rocos, which is an operating system for robots. And in this future world of robotics that we're going to be in, we're going to have robots from different manufacturers that all need to interact with each other. And how's that going to happen? And if something goes wrong in a transaction or interaction between two robots, how's that going to be resolved? First of all, from a liability point of view, whose fault it is, but secondly, from just a technological development point of view, how do you work out what happened and what went wrong? How do you know what a robot was thinking? So that seems to be like quite a big issue that needs to be addressed by somebody. Amazon about they're going to have these massive flying drone warehouses, so these massive sky ships, and then thousands of drones going back and forth between the sky warehouses and people's homes. And this will all be robotic interaction. What happens when the drone from Amazon comes to your front door and then your C-3PO Android robot is going out to meet the drone at the front door and pick up your latest delivery of Girl Scout cookies or whatever it's going to be, Domino's Pizza. These are interesting issues. It's good to see New Zealand companies up there talking about it. They showed a tweet last night from Elon Musk